Welcome, good day. Connecting the world, building tomorrow's sustainable port. Today I have with me Saskia Mureau, Director of Customer Digital of Port of Rotterdam. Saskia, I'm really happy to have you on our vodcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
I was preparing the vodcast and then I thought, okay, the first conversation we had, I still can clearly recall. We were having a chat and then suddenly you mentioned to me like, shall we switch to Dutch? Because we started off in English. Today we will stick to English for the audience, but that was really nice. And the other thing was you had a lot of questions for me at that point in time, wanted to know what we at TechPlay were doing. And I'm really happy now to turn the table and ask you a lot of questions on what you're doing, etc. But for the audience, maybe it's good if you shortly introduce yourself, what you're doing, what does it mean to be Director of Customer Digital, and maybe also a bit about the purpose of connecting the world and building tomorrow's sustainable port.
Sure. So thanks for the invitation. Really nice to be here. I am Director Customer Digital. And what that means basically is I lead digital for the ecosystem for the Port of Rotterdam. So I focus on basically 3 items, but anything related to customers of the port. And customers could be people who lease land on our industrial cluster. So it's the whole energy system, but it's also the logistics and the supply chains. It's the trucks, it's the all the companies basically who operate in the port. And together with them, we orchestrate the performance of the ecosystem, and we see how we can improve.
And sustainable is one of the words that is in the purpose. How does that sustainable translate into?
No, I mean that's an absolute key thing, because we do this with the key purpose to reduce emissions and to ensure efficiency, so that companies who operate in the port can run a good business, basically. The purpose, connecting the world, I think that's really important. And today we're here, and as TechPlay, you know this like no other. But the whole maritime industry is very globally connected. And the Port of Rotterdam is just a node in that supply chain. Or if you look at the industrial cluster in the regional industrial cluster. And as such, we need to make sure that connect with the world is working well. And on top of that, building tomorrow's sustainable port means that on the one hand, we need to ensure the energy transition happens. Then there is the digital transformation that's been going on for many years. And we now see that they start to intertwine.
Yeah, and that's where I learned that nice word from you, digital twinning, which I really like, is the sustainable and the digitization part.
Yeah, it's the twin transition.
Yeah. The green transition. I think that's really an interesting topic to dive a bit deeper on. If you look at the sustainability, is it pushing digitization, or is digitization pushing sustainability? How are they intertwined, and how are they working together?
Well, I think digital for me is just an enabler. It's an enabler to ultimately make sure that your business works well. And in this case, to also make sure that what we do in a better way. Because the footprint that we have today collectively with the supply chains globally and with the energy system, it needs to reduce. We've got a huge climate challenge, and a port is a conglomerate basically of all sorts of inefficiency, I think. Mm-hmm. Also huge added value to the world and to the country and Europe. But it does mean that we have a challenge to reduce those emissions and to see how we can jointly improve.
Yeah, and there is a lot of inefficiency, and on the other hand, I'm always amazed, impressed by the fact how the system is running. Like there are so many vessels coming in, there is so many cargo going through a port, and even though it's not all digitally connected, we have managed to come to a system that is actually capable and able of getting all the goods transported. That is really what attracts me to this industry. It's like, how does that happen? Now, you've been in your role now, I guess, for 2.5 years, something like that?
Yeah.
If you look back at those 2.5 years, yeah, and that's one of the questions I ask to many of the guests. Is like, what is it that you have learned in those 2.5 years that people really need to understand about the maritime industry? What is it that pops out that people should know or should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, for once, it's a great industry to be in, because the fact that it's so globally connected means that it's super relevant. We have this green corridor between Singapore and Rotterdam, and you see that 80% of the global trade basically goes via the Asia-Europe corridor. So in that sense, I think it's a very exciting industry. Also, huge amount of individual players need to do their part to make sure that the whole works. And I've always been very impressed with the resilience that is in the system, right? If there's a shock somewhere, whether it be a blockage in the Suez Canal or low water or whatever it may be, I see an industry sort of joining up and trying to solve that. So I think the fact that it's so interlinked makes it really interesting. It also makes it challenging at times.
That was my next question. What are the challenges you see?
If you look at, I think the Paris Climate Agreement at the time, maritime was not part of that, and that was for the simple reason that there are, I think, something like 140 member states who need to commit to certain climate goals if it's related to maritime. So it shows you the geopolitical angle and the importance of sort of the glue that you have throughout the world.
Yeah. You mentioned the green corridor from Asia to Europe. You've been working on that. We did have a couple of conversations on that. Is that a deliberate approach to take that step? You said 80% of goods is transported. Is that the reason why you are looking at a corridor instead of looking only at a port or looking at a network?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you could say the climate challenge is a wicked problem, and wicked problem needs different solutions and often needs diversity of thought. So basically, in order to tackle that, you need to work together in a different way, collaborate differently. So the Green Corridor as a concept was part of the Clydebank Declaration, UK, Netherlands, the Glasgow sort of climate conference and those things. And they basically said, we've seen with cars, with electric vehicles, that infrastructure and cars, you need to somehow they need to go at similar speeds in order to solve the chicken egg problem. And in maritime, that issue is even bigger because it's not yet known what fuel will be the fuel of the future. And actually, we see a multi-fuel future. So that means you need to start preparing for a different system next to fossil fuels to start accommodating that. It could be methanol, ammonia, and we see different solutions at the horizon. But the fact of the matter is also that you need systemic change to be able to do that, because today the maritime industry is used to having the bottom of the barrel of fossil fuels. And in the future, they all of a sudden need maybe 10, 15-year offtake agreements in order to get these new plants built so the fuel producers can start to produce different fuels. The cargo owners need to step up and need to be willing to pay the premium gap. So all of that needs careful orchestration, needs working with finance, needs working with the regulators, EU, local, Singapore. And our thinking was that if you are able to solve this in two big ports and the trade on those big ports, and you're able to solve it there, then the rest of the ports can basically start to quickly copy whatever lessons learned we take away from that. So we believe that for systemic change, a certain type of orchestration is needed. So that's why we started the Green Corridor.
It's leading in one end, and I also really like the statement about the industry is used to the bottom of the barrel. This really requires a different way of planning. You need to look ahead way further. You can trust that there is always a bottom of the barrel, but if you want to have the top fuels,
and it's different. It also means that you need to have different conversations with your suppliers, but also with your customers, right? And all of a sudden, as some of these vessel operators or liners, they have exposure in the middle because the timing of the fuel agreement and the actual offtake of and maybe transporting the cargo is not aligned. So how do you make sure that the whole piece lines up? So to be sort of collaborating and to be creative about solutions, but also to get some regulatory support for the first period when things are not don't have the benefit of economies of scale. That's basically what we see as a role.
And in that initiative, the Port of Rotterdam is taking a leading position. I think there is also something like compensating for greener fuels in the port. How does that work? How does that look like? The ZIM initiative, I believe that's it.
Zamba, I think.
Zamba.
Yes. So I mean, this is part of the fun of learning together. We work with the Aspen Institute and the Zero Emission Buyer Alliance. That's what Zamba stands for, because basically they got a group of cargo owners together. So I believe Walmart, IKEA, a whole bunch of other cargo owners. And they said, we need to start giving a buying signal on fuels to the liners. So they put a tender out for volume in the future to be delivered, but to be agreed right now. And we said as a corridor, well, we would really like to support that. And it would be great to get that volume on the corridor as such. And then we said, in order to give that sort of extra incentive as a port, can we waive the port dues for whoever wins the tender? So Hapag-Lloyd won in the end. And it means that for the vessels that sail into Port of Rotterdam on the fuel for the Zamba agreement, basically, we waive the port dues. That's a significant amount of money, but also a way for us to start seeing, okay, how could we use price incentives ourselves to help that energy transition and to help people move to the cleaner fuels?
Yeah, and solve the chicken egg problem as well.
Yeah, exactly.
In that sense.
Yeah.
I think clean fuels is one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, what are you doing? Operational excellence or efficiency, as it's called. We, as TechPlay, are really looking into what is actually happening in a port. Where is there waste in the port, or where can we identify activities that are not value contributing in that sense and make that visible in that sense? Mm-hmm. If you look at that operational efficiency part, how is that interwoven in your role as Director Customer Digital? Is that...
Yeah, I mean, for one, maybe to make the bridge to the previous part of the green corridor, because we call it a green and digital corridor. Mm-hmm. So I think one part of the equation is the whole global connect. And what we do in the digital part of the corridor is we start looking at how can we jointly reduce emissions, and how can we set the standards to the IMO on actually operationalizing some of the some of the standardization work that has happened over the past decades. And to give a simple example, we are building a port-to-port API with estimated times of arrivals and actual time of arrivals. And that means that Singapore and Rotterdam can start to exchange that information with one another. Now, the day sailing between Singapore and Rotterdam means that the effect on the planning at the start won't be that big. But what happens is we do this under the IMO flag. We then demonstrate what the API specs should be, how it would work between the two ports, and we're now starting to exchange the same thing with Tangermet and with Gothenburg, and that does become into our range of sailing. So that's just an example of how we use data standardization and use our implementation power to demonstrate and to help basically help drive the new ways of working. Now, if you look at it from a broader perspective, connecting the world is one piece. On the logistics, the whole port call is important with just-in-time sailing. The asset utilization of the Port of Rotterdam, so all the, not so much our assets, but the assets of our customers. So think terminals, think quays, but also inland ships, trucks. How do we ensure that the whole system works together? So it's the modalities with the train, barge, and truck. So how do we get all the containers into inland in a good way? And then last but not least, it's the whole challenge of the energy system of the industrial cluster. You've got many different parties there, refineries, chemical plants, cold stores, all sorts of companies who operate their business in the port. And what we see is that affordable energy is important, available energy, so think around congestion, for example, for electricity, but also sustainable energy, which is the whole move to the new fuels away from fossil. And we believe that digital can play an important role in that energy system of the future. So you referred to digital twinning before. How can we create basically a virtual energy system? Can we know what the different forms of energies flow through the port? Where do we need energy hubs? Where do we need batteries? Where do we need storage? Can we do flexing between different companies? So it's those type of things that we look at.
Yeah. And you started off with saying like we're working on a wicked problem.
Yeah.
It has many angles. If you now look at the wicked problem and the 2.5 years that you have been spending on it, what do you see as the biggest challenge in moving towards the transition? What are the forces within the industry that are kind of scary? I would say.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was approached by someone at a point around just-in-time sailing, and it seems, and they said, well, it seems that everyone in the world is talking about just-in-time sailing, but no one is actually doing it. So I think part of the challenge is we know what is required, but because it's systemic, it's really hard to create the change that is required. I mean, if you look at TechPlay, one of my pleas would be for all companies to start using solutions that are out there more. A TechPlay, many other providers have solutions for the issues we face or for the opportunities there are, but that makes it difficult. And what we often see, and this also is the role for the Port of Rotterdam, is how can we jointly drive performance where it's really difficult for individual parties to make that change, because it's often many different actors who need to do something differently to progress. Now, combine that with the fact that lots of data is out there, but we're not very insight rich. So how do we start creating the right insights so that ultimately a captain or an operator, someone can do something differently? And I think that's the actual doing, that's the hard part.
Yeah. I really can relate to that. I think in the journey of TechPlay, where we started off with tools helping to eliminate, to address waste. But that's only one step in the equation, because it's a collaborative process. So there are multiple stakeholders in that. So what we actually identified is like, okay, it is really hard to make the business case even in one company, but let alone if you start thinking about the ecosystem or the collaboration in that sense. And for me, it is also like making visible where there is still potential gain. That is for me one of the potential answers to the wicked problem, creating visibility. I do have the strong belief if there is money on the table, someone will actually start thinking about how can I take that money. But it needs to be quantified, and it needs to be quantified more concretely than it is like it's a very generic business case of the industry where there is a lot of collaboration. Even that, and just in time, even if companies are very close, they even are the cargo owner chartering the vessels and have the terminal themselves. Even within the company, it's a big challenge in that sense.
Absolutely. And I really like how you say that you need the information basically to be able to then take action. And there is, since I've been in this job, there's two really big sort of shifts in thinking. The one is that we really need to focus on reducing emissions. So yes, to efficiency, often they equal emissions, but we need to focus on emissions. We're going to set strict targets around this. Many of the companies operating in the port have pledged to some sort of emission reduction target. We need to collectively go after that emission reduction. The second big thing is that we need to start thinking around the operational performance of the port as a product. So I'm very keen. I have some marketing background, and I ultimately believe that customers make a choice for operating in the port, yes or no. The cargo owners ultimately say, I use Rotterdam versus another port to basically ship my goods. So collectively, we need to make sure that the operational performance of the total port is improving. And the customer experience, if you may, is a good one. What it means for us is that we're putting a layer of data and analytics over the port now, so we can start to see where are the bottlenecks, how is our performance, how do we benchmark, where can we start to influence. And what I really like about the starting to influence is we need to do that together, right? We cannot sit in the Port of Rotterdam tower and start dreaming this up on slides. This is actual pilots with operators, with vessel owners, with terminals, but also with startups. And I believe that startups play a really important role in that. So we make combination of groups, we learn in pilots, and once we've got the learning out of it, we then see, okay, what does this mean for the systemic challenge that we've got together?
If there's something, is there something in that you want to have as a also this journey on the port? I always had this when I started off 10 years ago. I had this sentence like the water is always floating to the lowest point, and the lowest point for me is in the financial in operational efficiency of a port. Of course, there is some financial aspects to it, so I really can relate to that one as well. What I also see, and I'm curious what your take is on that, is like you're talking about pilots. Is there already sufficient common ground to start a pilot? Has this changed something in the willingness in this collaboration to do that, or and maybe that's based on conversations we had. People are talking about many different ways of looking at the data. There are so many truth in that world. Everyone has his own truth in that sense. What is the starting point? Is that getting clear understanding of what it is, or is it starting with a pilot? Is it or is it
probably all of the above, right?
Yeah.
So maybe two examples of where we've started to apply this, and we're in a learning process. I think we're all in a learning process. One of the examples is as part of the Green Corridor, we are very keen to learn more about the ship to shore communications. So is the ship, is the captain, so that's identity management. Mm-hmm. It's also how can you reliably get communication to and fro. We basically defined what it is we want to learn together. Then we did a request for proposal to the market. We had loads of different startups and scale-ups reply to that. And we're now working with 8 different parties who help us tackle this in different pilots to start learning and to start knowing what do we need to solve in this in this particular space. So that's a sort of a big challenge. On a smaller scale, we're looking at just-in-time sailing. So then it's just one trader in this case as a cargo owner. There's a terminal operator. Then we involve the right nautical service providers where required. And with that group, we basically say, okay, what is the problem? And you use sort of innovation techniques to get to the problem, because everyone has a piece of the puzzle, and somehow you need to then define what is the problem. But there are techniques for that. At the startup world basically has worked like that for decades. Find the friction, and you'll find what you need to work on.
Yeah.
And then we also use the startups to help ensure that we measure the right thing, because often there are solutions out there already who have data feeds and who are able to show that.
Yeah. And talking about rules, that was one of the conversations I had in the industry. What I learned was the fact that there is still a lot of confusion on who is responsible exactly for what in a port call process. Where does it start? Where does it end? Of course, there are contracts on one end which agree like, what if this happens? Who needs to pay? But that's different than the operational perspective on that. Is that also a part of these pilots that you're running to get clarity on these processes?
Yeah, I think so. And there's also the whole space of before we different parties would require different information, and they would be put in certain documents, and they would be populated. Whereas now we start thinking from data elements rather than documents that will be spread to people. So we all work from the same data elements, and you don't need to populate or replace a document. You need to replace sort of data flows. I think that the different roles. Yes, maybe another example on how we innovate is the basically the bunkering process. As one of the largest bunker ports, we have a lot of bunkering, and Singapore went to EBDN, BDN being the bunker node. And the digital bunker node we would like to have in Rotterdam too. So then it's a matter of checking with Singapore who were the parties that went to the e-bunker node. Singapore will be fully EBDN, I think, by end of this year. Which are the startups that they whitelisted, and we're now piloting with the global operators who have also their operations in Rotterdam. With a number of these startups who have the solutions. And then we hope that we can go faster too.
Yeah. And if you look at this is a process of transition, you learn, then you need to institutionalize it, the systemic changes you were referring to make sure that the system is holding it and that it's not someone. What is the role of the port authorities of the Port of Rotterdam in that process? Where does it start and where does it kind of end?
And if I can turn the tables for a moment, what would you like it to be?
A good question. For me, I believe having a partner that enables the experimentation and supports in getting things organized, because I think that is the really tough problem for a startup. Maybe you have the entrance in one company, but you need to have entrance in 3 companies. You need to talk with the tax, you need to talk with the pilots, you need to talk with the bunker company, and being at that table, I think that would be something of value. But of course, then the next question is like, okay, now we have done the pilot. What is the potential upside in that? So what I would like is to have that entrance ticket, basically. But then also knowing that the fact that if there is a product that can be or a service that can be created out of it, that you can kind of monetize it, that you are not working with a competitor in that sense.
Yeah, and it's very much in line what we hear from many different parties. I think the role we see for ourselves is to orchestrate performance of that port as a product. It means different things at different times. So sometimes we facilitate these type of conversations that you mention. Sometimes we provide pilot support or facilitation as well as pilot money to make sure that we reward the different people that participate in that. Sometimes we're an investor. And I think a really important part that a role we will always take is we look at the digital infrastructure. Now we've got Portbase as our port community system. Very proud of having Portbase, and it's been there for 2 decades. It's clearly a way that enables all the different parties to work together. So that's an important part of our digital infrastructure. We also see that in the future, the world is going more to federative data sharing. So how do we now enable that? A place, basically a marketplace where different people can put their data products in a window, so everyone in the world can see, okay, that's an interesting, for example, different terminals with estimated time of discharge for containers. Okay, I would like to get a basket of all the terminals for Rotterdam with that specific data point. So that marketplace, I think, is something that we should facilitate, and we're building that together with Portbase. But that marketplace will also contain not just the data products, but also services and solutions. Because exactly what you say, you would like to, once something works, you would like to get it scaled. And there's definite benefit if multiple parties use the same or at a minimum interoperable systems to solve a business problem. So that marketplace will contain, hopefully, all the best global startup and scale-up solutions for the maritime industry, and it becomes a way where you can easily work together. You can access the data, but also the solutions that are out there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, Saskia, I still have so many questions, but I think we're getting towards the end of the conversation. I really would like to thank you for the conversation we had. It gave me new insights. I really love to chat about this systemic change and what to do with what we need to do in order to accomplish that. I think that's a mission that we have been on as TechPlay for a while, and you clearly are as well.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being on the vodcast, and looking forward.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
pleasure, okay. And great working with you too. Okay. Thank you, Leon.
Thank you very much.